All right, guys. So I'm gonna do a short conversation and welcome. Speculation and stuff in the video. I don't really care about it, but I'm gonna talk about Star Citizen purchases and things like that when it comes to the game because yes, the game can be expensive and funding and backing can be expensive as well. Um, if anyone's kept up, I don't really make content, but basically I've watched Star Citizen for a long time and I came back to the game before all the 4.0 announcements and Squadron 42 announcements and stuff this last go around. Specifically because I thought, the tempo was going to be start picking up and we'd have a game come out or getting to the point where we'd be pushing to an actual game that's playable for a general amount of people over the next few years. So needed to get in, start building connections, start learning the game a bit more before the thing actually released. Now, when it comes to purchases, there are people that I know that spend exorbitant amounts of money on Star Citizen. Probably, more just casual people than you probably realize in the game that just they play off and on, or they play and they have a couple of friends or, a couple of kids they want to play with, but they own every single ship that's came out. I can't even tell you how many people over the years that I've ran into that it's just them and a couple of guys, and they have an Orion, a Banu Merchantman, all this other stuff, which realistically we got to look at this a couple of ways. Um, yes, Star Citizen is going to need money to continue development and things like that, but they are pushing for the 4.0 and 1.0 in Star Citizen, and they are pushing for the Squadron 42 getting ready to go in sales. So likely over the next few years, if Squadron 42 actually is coming down the road, they're going to have to start making more money in order to fund marketing to push that game out the door when it's ready, right? Now, that's a plus potentially on there. But when it comes to the Star Citizen game, it's probably going to be a while before they ever do like AI controlled ships that are like separated from you. And I think when if you want to buy a ship in the game, you really only need one ship, but unless you just have no time to play and you just want to like take one ship out one week and one ship out the next week, and if you have like a group of four to 4, 10, 4 to 10, and you wanted to randomly take out ships of certain types, certain periods of time, each couple weeks or whatever, and then swap them, I could see having a few ships like that. But when it comes to just playing the game, I don't think at this stage that you need to buy a whole bunch of ships to be a part of the game and part of the bigger picture. If you look at someone like me who spent quite a lot of money on Star Citizen, which is very rare for me to do with a video game, to put that much, but I have backed a number of games in the past. Uh, I have spent a lot of money, but it was not just to play the game. So for a new player coming in, if you just want to play the game, you don't need to spend that much. You look at like Escape from Tarkov, for example. The base game wasn't that expensive, but the premium Edge of Darkness edition, when it was getting backed and when it came out, that gave you a little bit of an advantage in the game, was like 200 and something dollars. And for 200 and something dollars in Star Citizen, you can get a pretty decent ship in any profession. You get repair ships, you can get medical ships, all these kind of things. And those are the kind of ships that I would expect for you to be able to earn or progress to through the main storyline as you go through the game. And potentially there could be multiple storylines when you go through the game. Um, so I would say that any of those starting base ships probably are going to be somewhat easy to earn. The bigger ships, I mean, you could spend like $600, $700 on a ship. I think that's pushing it for, people coming in, but there's still a few years left of development probably before the 1.0 update. So you might be able to get some of your money value out of the ship before the actual launch and then have the ship afterwards. That's how I look at it anyway, is that you're paying for the convenience of the ship and stuff that you could have, and then you're paying to have it when the game launches so that you don't have to go through all the burnout to go and do what you want to do. So I could still see putting anywhere between that $200 to $600 range if you're really wanting to like back the game, but I don't see new players needing to put thousands of dollars in at all, if any money at all. And that's going to put more pressure on them to hurry up and finish this thing and push out some content for it and get the 4.0 and 1.0 stuff done. Now, yeah, they still need to develop the tech, and they're going to need backing to develop the tech, but it's getting to that stage where it's not like, don't think about Star Citizen so much. It's not where we need to like cut funding from Star Citizen to take it and make that game worse. It's we need to slowly apply a little bit of pressure to make sure that Squadron 42 is getting prepped and out the door so that they can make funding with that game. That game needs to be good. They've been working on it for a while. They said it's feature complete and it's polishing, and they put a date for like 2026. So if we're looking at 2, 3 years before that game starts coming out, then you can back the game a little bit, get excited for it, but we need to help ease them out the door with Squadron 42, I think. Whereas Star Citizen, I'm still going to be backing the progress because I was personally after the technology and all of that. But for a player coming into the game, like if you're just wanting a video game, and I know Star Citizen can be like an epic game that has like all these things that are promised for it, but uh, you just gotta look at it like if I was trying to back the game right now, I wouldn't put thousands of dollars into it at this point. I've seen the promise, I get all that, but we already have seen that they have a lot of progress, they had a lot of development, a lot of things are getting ready to start coming out the door. I don't have to risk thousands of dollars at this stage to see what happens with the game. And so I don't think any players necessarily should have to put in a bunch of money. All those ships are going to be earnable in game. They're going to be craftable in game. You're going to be able to find people to play with in game. And I think even after the game is out, a lot of these smaller to medium sized ships, even like the large ships, like Constellation and like Down, a lot of those ships are going to be very important and vital to the game's infrastructure and for organizations. And I don't think having more and more big ships in an org is going to necessarily make it better in the grand picture of things. I think a lot of these smaller ships are going to be very, very important. Um, and so you're not going to be at a huge disadvantage, and plenty of people are going to want your assistance most likely. Um, the main thing would just be like transporting your stuff around. And the reason I can kind of picture this a bit now is because if we look at some of the ships, some of the original ships, especially the Constellation series with the size 5 front turrets, um, if nothing changes or anything on that ship, originally that was supposed to be one of the best ships. And I've had this thing in my head for a while now with like the Carracks and stuff. It has size 4 guns, it needs size 5 guns, but if you really look at it, like those Connies, the Corsairs, they seem to be hitting that sweet spot where they have the firepower to deal with large ships potentially, or do a lot of damage to a large ship like a Carrack. They potentially have the damage potential to go through like some of the bigger capital ships that aren't like military style, and they're going to be flexible enough to do like small, medium, large content, fly around on planets, etc. So you get a lot of utility off of that, and then that ship's only like $200, which is that kind of that sweet spot where like when I backed Escape from Tarkov, $200 for a pretty decent benefit, but it isn't pay to win necessarily, but it would make streamlining the early game, a lot easier, and then the end game is still going to be earnable. The reason like I kind of justified putting in a bunch of money into the game over the years is because it's been like 10 plus years. And the equivalent of basically the equivalent of me spending the amount of money I have would be either having a gym membership for $20 to $40 a month over, 10-year period, or, me going out and eating a dinner at a fast food restaurant once a week for a 10-year period. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of pay like subscription models and stuff. I don't like paying monthly fees for things. But in the grand picture, over a 10-year period, I've gotten enjoyment out of the game. I've gotten a lot of value, like just playtime, all the content I can watch while I'm working and stuff, just, watching things online, gives me some entertainment, gives me something to think about during the day. And then backing not only just that game, you're looking at backing Squadron 42, backing Star Citizen, backing a game engine, you know, backing, all like pushing the tech for video games so that other companies and stuff eventually will have to push up and make better games at some point so we don't get copy paste stuff. And then just the ability to have that potential for this to be a lifelong game for the end of us. Because when I originally backed the game, I was, still in college and I was starting like esports careers and stuff. I was playing, athletics, sports, and I was kind of falling out of the game phase. I wasn't really playing games as much except for like during the esports events, and I started playing more competitively to save time. I didn't have the time to invest in games, so I tried to get more competitive in games. And eventually, you learn that like being competitive in games gets very boring. It's very tedious. It becomes more time consuming to learn and keep up with all the new information, practice all the stuff, all of that. So it's just another like stressful thing that made games worse. And then you go back and try to play some older games and you realize all of that stuff has become competitive, even like old RTS games. So you can't even really relax and play a game anymore because everything's super crazy. And then you look at like some games that are enjoyable, but they don't have a long lifespan. They die out in a few years or they never fully took off in the first place. And it would be nice to have a game that you could just play for, 10, 20 years and not have to really worry about it too much. And my hope has been that Star Citizen would end up being that game, even if it isn't the best game out there. The fact that you can do so much in one spot and that it has like shooting elements, it's like a shooter game and an MMO. It means that you have that high end that like Tarkov doesn't have. Like, uh, I don't really play flight simulators and all that stuff anymore, but I'm fine with it in Star Citizen. I'm fine with crafting and base building and stuff. I like survival games as survival elements, but the shooting aspect has always been like one of the primary things for me. And realistic shooters like Escape from Tarkov have always been, one of the best games for me to play, but it never had the high end next level. There wasn't a purpose for what you were doing. And so like Star Citizen more than other MMOs has that ability to kind of have me play it for a long period of time because other MMOs, I mean, you level your character and you make your gear better or whatever, and you mine materials and stuff, but the combat in the game and those games is more or less it's all prediction and uh like basically prediction. It's just there's a lot of patterns because most people copy paste the same builds, and once you get used to the rotations that people use in an MMO game, you literally are just like, okay, he's playing this class. These are his abilities most likely. These are the gear that is most likely running. This is his kind of rotation. I need to hit like in this couple second window, I need to hit this thing and apply pressure and interrupt this specific skill, and you win. Shooter games have a lot more variation. Like there's a lot of things that can happen from, jams, just bad equipment, armors and stuff, ammunition, positioning, um, types of gear, and then also with like ships and stuff, it just adds on that whole other element of, air support and transportation and all of that. And then you add in animals and all of that kind of stuff to the game. And you can see how it can start getting a lot more intense as a shooter, even though it's more arcadey, it's more bullety, it's kind of more like a Battlefield Halo mixture. Um, so I still think that backing the game and getting into the game is good, but I don't think that putting thousands of dollars into the game, you're necessarily going to get your time's worth of investment before it comes out. Because if you spend, $10,000, let's say, in the next few years, and the game comes out and it isn't like super, next level and everyone comes back in, then you basically threw $10,000 to the wind for no reason. Whereas like someone like me, I've had 10 years of uh, content to watch, content to play, ships and stuff to try, time saved in the game, in the alpha to, make my life less tedious while I'm playing. And I think that potentially gives me the money value back over the years compared to just throwing it out to the wind now. Because if a game looks like it's going to do well and it's about to come out, I would never be able to justify spending thousands of dollars on something that I could just earn in game. But when you look at pushing the game, developing the game, backing the game, watching the game, playing the game for 10 something years, and then also being able to potentially play the game for another 10 years, 20 years after it comes out. Like, let's say Star Citizen comes out in like 2 or 3 years. Well, you're looking at like 15 years of content, gameplay, all of that stuff. Plus, let's say it lasts for 20 years. Like let's say like 10 years, play 10-year MMO. Uh, you're looking at 20, 25 years potentially that you could have been doing that. And if you go from that consistency, if we're doing like a $20 meal at a restaurant every week, you go out and eat once a week over a 25-year period, you're looking at 25,000 dollars. I mean, probably 20 plus $1,000 that you'd be putting in, you know. So over a longer period of time, the amount of money that you're spending just kind of the percentages are a little bit longer. Like I've put the money investment in now, but if the game lasts 10 years, then it's splitting down to like $10 a week. It's $40 a month. It's still a lot, but $10 a week on something that you really like doing, not a huge deal. And then if it goes 20 years, you're looking at 35 years. You're looking at $5 a week. So the better the game comes out, the longer it lasts, all of that. And also that I'm going to be older by the time it's actually finished. I don't really want to go around playing a bunch of different games. I would like to play just one game, be able to progress in one game, and stay at a high level in that game, and not have to keep grinding over and over, unless friends or something want to go play a game for fun. MMOs in particular take a lot of time to invest into and play, and I don't have the time to invest in a bunch of different MMOs, whereas I could play like a smaller MMO as well. And then you also got to look at what kind of player you are. So for me in the past, generally I'm like a solo player in a lot of survival games, etc. So for me, like a terrapin or whatever would be fine with me. Gives you the armor, gives you a little bit of gun power, gives you scouting potential and stuff, utility that you could provide to a bigger organization. I would be fine with that. I'd be fine playing the Boba Fett life. You just get you a good little fighter ship or like a cutlass or whatever else. You roam around, you find people, you do things, you kill animals, all of that. I'd be fine with that gameplay as a solo player. But for me as well, when it comes to Star Citizen and also other MMOs, I realized when I was playing Guild Wars 2 that I didn't really enjoy the storyline and stuff that they had in that game because it all fell to hell. And the open world wasn't really worth exploring because everything became this, super easy you know, mosh pit of players that were just going around killing stuff, which Star Citizen could probably still turn into. I really hope it doesn't, but like the Sandworm, for instance, unless it scales up or does something or has like some mega damage reduction, players are just going to figure out how many people it takes to one shot it and then just go around one shotting worms all day and like killing everything. Um, so like if things like that happens, then like the open world potentially can die off a little bit. But I learned that I didn't have as much time to put into MMOs. The combat and stuff PvP wise never really was super, I like floating in that in between the casual and pro level of games. I like floating in that range because like pro level, it's like you can get really good to where you can compete with like pro players, but to push up to that next like 10-20% of players in the upper portion, you have to put exponentially more time into a game and just practice and stuff in general to get to that level. So I've never really cared much to putting that much effort to being the best, but I like being a little bit better than just like normal casual players because you get that good balance. So, um, a lot of games, just like the PvP combat, just either gets if it's too oppressive and there's too many like people watching YouTube videos and they all become professional players, it kills out the casual base because they just can't compete and they can't do anything in the game. And then if everything is too casual, then you don't really get those high-end PvP players that keep some things rolling for a while. So you got that. But I realized that I don't necessarily care about playing for myself in MMOs anymore. I like developing structure. I like developing content for players in game. And realistically, that started in Guild Wars 2. They had a drought of content for a number of years because they messed up their storyline, they messed up their dungeon content, and all of that stuff. So they didn't have anything going on for a few years, and everyone was complaining in the MMOs. But the one thing the MMOs used to do, like Guild Wars 1 and other ones before that, was player made content. And Guild Wars 2 had basically a blank canvas that anyone could have made content for in the open world because there were so many people. The thing was is that no one was doing it and no one cared to make any of it because it didn't make money or whatever for players in the game. People were just constantly gear grinding, so you didn't have the fun element that you had in the older games. So like you had people that used to do like scavenger hunts or hide and seek or like snowball tag and stuff that would just pop up and people do it. And the newer MMOs, players just don't have that. They want to just like sit there and mindlessly run in a circle and kill things without having to do much and then getting a bunch of loot and becoming stronger. For me, I developed a guild during that time that first off started trying to make player-made race courses and stuff to use mounts with. That started gathering some steam, but it was still hard to get taken off the ground because it's hard to get anyone to actually commit to that. Um, you couldn't interact with new players in that game because the storylines and stuff were so easy that there wasn't any reason to go through the storyline or help a new player with the storyline. The guild system I ended up using was people wanted player housing. People wanted their own, house and shack or whatever to build and show off to people. And they had housing instances, but nobody really wanted to go into the housing instance besides to farm nodes, so no one really cared. But the guild hall system had guilds, halls that you could pick and upgrade, and you could place individual items. So there are guild halls that had housing inside. And so we ended up developing a Roman guild and ended up putting all of the legal systems and stuff in the Roman guild, finding role players, and then having a military and a political system where people could vote or fight their way up ranks. And any player in the guild could become the leader, could become the guild leader and, help control finances, help decide what people wanted to do, and help pay for all the other stuff. And depending on what ranks you were in the guild, you got different houses in the guild hall, and then you got to build the house, decorate it, all of that. And we'd host arena battles and stuff that we placed bids on. So there was money flowing through the city, and you can invite people in, and then people could see your house, and then people go. And that's what made a lot of content in Guild Wars 2 for a while. That became very, very cool. And with Star Citizen, if you're someone that wants to build an organization or something like that, that's where I could potentially see still putting in a bunch of money. If you just want to be a single solo player or whatever, that 40 to, $600 mark is probably the sweet spot, depending on how much you really want to put into the game. I probably wouldn't even really want to go over 200 because you can get a lot of the base good ships for like $200. And there's going to be plenty of people that are going to craft ships and stuff when the game comes out, especially when 1.0 comes out. So you won't have that problem. But if you want to build an organization, I can see spending more money on the game to build out your fleet and your organization. The problem I see with a lot of that, though, is that people are buying um, ships. They don't really care about being an organization, but they're buying a number of ships that they feel like they're going to use on occasion, just kind of rotate them in and out with a smaller crew, which is also, I guess, potentially viable, but you don't really get your necessarily your money value back because you could have just bought one of those ships, invested in that, did that money loop, made a bunch of money, and then bought the other ships in game after the game comes out, potentially. Is it worth it for you to have one big ship, work for a couple of weeks to buy the other big ship that you want, and then you can rotate a little bit more? Probably is going to be more efficient and better, but organizations being able to recruit people into an org, um, having ships and stuff to entice people into those is probably one of the most important things, especially since in MMOs, players tend to drift towards organizations that have the biggest and best stuff that they can provide. Now, depending on what the missions and stuff in Star Citizen end up becoming, I could see this going either way because you have organizations that have like 20 javelins and stuff. If there is in-game content that requires a javelin and produces really rare loot or items, I could see a lot of those orgs still absorbing people into them. But I feel like a lot of people, especially if NPC crew ever becomes an actual factor into the game, are going to want to earn one of their own ships, even if it is only NPC crewed, because a lot of people are going to want that potential and that status, that prestige that comes with having those bigger ships. So as an organization, I don't even think that you need to put as much money as a lot of these orgs are, because a lot of these orgs' funds are going towards Idrises and Javelins, um, uh, probably like Pioneers, probably um, uh, Orions, these huge capital ships that can produce a lot of resources and a lot of fuel, but really, I think as an organization starting off, you only really need to offer like some utility for people to um, come and gather with you and play with you. And realistically, what that is you need fuel, you need repair, and you need like basic medical. Those three things are going to allow you to have um, most of what players need to just do what they want to do in the universe. And I think that's where you build an organization really, really from. And this kind of stems from, let's say, the Starfare, for example. Starfare you can get for like $300, 350 bucks, right? It's in that sweet spot. It's going to be something you can kind of earn, and potentially it is a ship that would allow you to expand the distance of a fleet of smaller ships that everyone can fly themselves. And so, like, if you wanted to start an org and you were going to go to like Pyro, if you had a Starfarer and you had the material in the Starfarer to give everyone enough quantum fuel, you could probably make it to and from a planet on Pyro as long as nothing bad happened. So to me, like the Starfarer is a perfect starter org ship to be able to apply to a fleet and extend the duration and allow them to do the things that they want to do. Then you have like the Vulcan, which also can hold fuel and do repair, but you wouldn't be able to do the top tier repair. You could say Crucible, but not necessarily, needed for the most part. If you had a Starfarer and like two Vulcans, you're already looking at like two medium tanks on the Vulcan plus the Starfarer's fuel tank and repair capabilities for all of those smaller ships. But if someone's ship gets blown up or damaged, then they just have to pile onto another ship and you keep going. But you give that utility for people to join you and also do other things in the universe. So if they want to mine, if they want to craft, if they want to do combat, if they want to do salvage, if they want to explore, whatever, everyone's going to need fuel, repair, and some baseline of medical to keep them in the game and make it more time efficient for them. And so you don't need javelins and Idrises and things like that necessarily. You need supply lines that can keep people enjoying the game, and a lot of those aren't really crazily expensive. Starfare $350, Vulcan $200. Um, Maybe you could look at like cargo ships or something like that, like the Connies and stuff. You can make a fleet of smaller ships potentially still handle a vast majority of gameplay. You just wouldn't be able to handle big space battle combat. But who wants to go and bring their Idris out and then chase down a bunch of Connies, um, and obliterate them with a rail cannon? They might get one or two of you, unless you get interdicted. But that's just kind of the risk of it. It's the fun of the game at that point. But I'm gonna head off. I don't have a lot of time, so y'all guys have a good one, and